Before he became the boogeyman of the French Revolution, Maximilien Robespierre was just a lawyer from Arras. A bit of a loner, meticulously dressed, and apparently cursed with a complexion contemporaries described as sea green. He was famously nicknamed the Incorruptible, which is one of those labels that sounds great until you realize it often means someone is completely inflexible. He arrived in Paris as a delegate for the Third Estate, with a briefcase full of Rousseau and a burning desire to create a perfectly virtuous republic. France, at the time, was a chaotic whirlwind of royal collapse, foreign invasion threats, and bread riots. It was the perfect environment for a man who believed, with every fiber of his being, that he knew exactly how to fix everyone else's moral failings, whether they wanted him to or not. A real fun guy at parties, I'm sure. So, how do you save a fledgling republic from tearing itself apart? If you're the National Convention in 1793, you create something called the Committee of Public Safety. It has a wonderfully reassuring name, doesn't it? It sounds like a group that hands out pamphlets on fire safety. In reality, it was a 12-man war cabinet given extraordinary powers to deal with France's enemies. And Robespierre, our sea-green idealist, quickly became its dominant voice. Initially, it made a certain kind of crisis logic sense. Armies were at the borders, counter-revolutionaries were suspected everywhere, but temporary emergency powers have a funny way of becoming permanent. The committee started as a shield for the revolution. It would soon become a hammer, and everyone started to look like a nail. The first order of business was to define what exactly an enemy was. And here's where things get darkly hilarious. The Law of Suspects, passed in September 1793, was a masterpiece of paranoid vagueness. You could be arrested for being a former noble, which makes sense, I guess, or for not having a certificate of patriotism, which is tricky. You could also be rounded up for speaking insidiously, for showing lack of enthusiasm for the revolution, or even for simply being someone who has done nothing against liberty, but has done nothing for it. Think about that. You could be sent to the guillotine for being insufficiently cheerful. Suddenly, the entire country was walking on eggshells. Did you use the wrong form of address? Was your facial expression politically incorrect? Paris became a city holding its breath because the wrong sigh could get you killed. A key feature of any good paranoid dictatorship is that eventually you run out of actual enemies and have to start inventing new ones, often from your own friend group. Enter Georges Danton. He was everything Robespierre wasn't: loud, charismatic, corrupt, and loved by the people. He had been a key leader of the revolution, but by late 1793, he started making noises about ending the terror. He thought the emergency was over, and it was time to get back to normal. For Robespierre, this was heresy. Virtue doesn't take a vacation. Suggesting an end to the terror meant you were a weak-willed traitor. So Danton and his followers, the Indulgents, were arrested. At his sham trial, Danton was magnificent, but it was useless. On his way to the scaffold, he famously told the executioner, "Show my head to the people. It's well worth a look." He understood political theater better than anyone. Just when you thought things couldn't get any weirder, Robespierre decided the revolution had an atheism problem. The de-Christianization campaign had gone too far, in his opinion, creating a moral vacuum. So what does a rational, enlightened leader do? He invents his own state-sponsored religion, obviously. Welcome to the cult of the Supreme Being. It was basically deism with French flags. On June 8, 1794, Robespierre orchestrated the Festival of the Supreme Being, a public spectacle of epic proportions. He designed his own sky blue coat for the occasion and led a procession to a giant, papier-mâché statue representing atheism. Then he set it on fire, revealing a statue of wisdom inside, which was unfortunately blackened by the smoke. The symbolism was lost on no one. His colleagues watched this display, with him acting as high priest of his own weird cult, and many decided he had finally, completely lost his mind. 2 days after playing high priest, Robespierre and his allies pushed through the Law of 22 Prairial. This law was essentially the legal system deciding to just skip all the boring parts. It stripped defendants of the right to a public trial and legal counsel. It allowed for no witnesses. The Revolutionary Tribunal could convict someone based on moral proof alone, which is as terrifyingly vague as it sounds. And the available verdicts were narrowed down to 2 choices: acquittal or death. That's it. No prison, no exile. You were either innocent or you died. This kicked off the Great Terror. In the 6 weeks before this law, about 1,200 people were executed in Paris. In the 6 weeks after, the number was over 1,300. The guillotine got very, very busy. By July 1794, the atmosphere in the National Convention was thick with fear. Robespierre had been absent for a few weeks, stewing in his apartment, probably polishing his collection of moral certainties. He returned on July 26th, the 8th of Thermidor, to give a 2-hour speech. It was rambling, self-pitying, and full of threats. He spoke of a vast conspiracy against him and the Republic. He claimed to have a new list of traitors who needed to be purged. Then he made the single greatest political blunder of his career. When the Assembly demanded he name the names on his list, he refused. This was a fatal mistake. Without a specific list, every single man in that room assumed his name was on it. He had accidentally united all of his enemies, real and imagined, against him in a shared moment of pure self-preservation. That night, the previously terrified politicians did something remarkable. They organized. Conspirators met in secret, realizing it was either him or them. The next day, 9th Thermidor, Robespierre's ally Saint-Just went to the tribune to speak. He didn't get a sentence out before the shouting started. They wouldn't let him talk. Then Robespierre rushed forward to defend him, but his own voice was drowned out by cries of "Down with the tyrant!" He tried to speak, but he couldn't. Legend has it that one deputy, Garnier de l'Aube, screamed, "The blood of Danton chokes him!" It was pure chaos. The man who had controlled France through the power of his words was now rendered completely silent by a wall of noise. The convention, in a stunning and swift reversal, voted to arrest Robespierre, his brother Augustin, Saint-Just, and their key allies. The arrest didn't stick immediately. His jailers were too scared to hold him, and he was freed by supporters from the Paris Commune, who took him to the Hôtel de Ville, the city hall. For a few hours, it looked like a civil war might break out between the convention and the Commune. But Robespierre hesitated. He failed to rally his forces. Meanwhile, the convention declared him an outlaw, meaning he could be executed without a trial. Around 2 a.m., troops loyal to the convention stormed the building. They found a scene of chaos. One ally had jumped out a window, his brother was injured, and Robespierre himself was on the floor, his jaw shattered by a pistol shot. To this day, nobody knows for sure if he tried to kill himself or if one of the soldiers, a gendarme named Charles-André Merda, shot him. Either way, the great orator was now physically incapable of speaking. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a guillotine. The end was swift. Because he'd been declared an outlaw, Robespierre didn't even get the sham trial he gave to so many others. He was laid on a table in the Committee of Public Safety's offices, the very room from which he had directed the terror, bleeding and silent for hours. The next afternoon, on July 28, 1794, he and 21 of his closest allies were taken to the Place de la Révolution. The cart ride was a public spectacle. The crowds that had cheered him during the Festival of the Supreme Being now screamed insults and curses at him. Just before his execution, the executioner ripped off the bandage holding his broken jaw together, causing him to let out a single agonized scream. It was the last sound he ever made. The blade fell, and the reign of terror was officially over. With Robespierre gone, the Thermidorian reaction began. The architects of his downfall quickly dismantled the machinery of the terror, freed suspects, and preached a return to moderation. Which sounds great, except the government they created, the Directory, was famously corrupt, ineffective, and chaotic. It lurched from crisis to crisis for 4 years, unable to solve France's economic problems or military challenges. It turns out that getting rid of the tyrant doesn't magically fix everything. And this weak, unstable government created the perfect power vacuum for a brilliant, ambitious, and wildly popular young general to fill. So, after all the bloodshed, all the purging, all the attempts to create a perfect republic of virtue, France ended up with Napoleon Bonaparte, an emperor. The whole decade-long revolutionary ordeal to get rid of a monarch ended with them getting another, more effective one. You just can't write this stuff. It's easy to paint Robespierre as a simple monster, a bloodthirsty dictator. But that's too easy. The truly terrifying thing about him is that he may have actually believed what he was saying. He wasn't motivated by greed or a lust for personal power in the traditional sense. He was driven by an unshakable belief in his own virtue and a utopian vision for France. He thought that if you could just cut away all the corrupt, selfish, and imperfect parts of society, you'd be left with a beautiful, pure republic. The problem is, the imperfect parts are always people. And once you decide that human beings are the obstacle to your perfect plan, you're already on the road to the guillotine. He is the ultimate historical lesson that the road to hell isn't just paved with good intentions, it's paved with the certainty that your intentions are the only ones that count. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!